Good morning, I'm Melissa Meeks and I'm going to debrief yesterday's peer learning activity. Let's start by remembering how Eli works. You completed a small bit of writing on Monday, you gave feedback on Tuesday, and today we're focusing on processing and debriefing feedback. Tomorrow you'll build a revision plan and perhaps you would revise. In a course, we could repeat these steps building from where we ended or starting a new project. I want to put the emphasis on processing and debriefing feedback because, as Dylan William explains in his article, The Secret of Effective Feedback from ASCD, the only important thing about feedback is what students do with it. In debriefing, our goal is to inspire revision, to help writers see their drafts differently because of the criteria of the assignment and what they can see in others' drafts. The writing task was simply to compose a syllabus blurb or talking points, and it had no criteria about length or other content because participants in this course are diverse. You can tell from the drafts you've read that we have very different ideas about what a syllabus should sound like and what kind of information it should contain. In this review, I wanted to document the different ways people might approach the pitch for peer learning to students and give us a sense of what's possible. Most reviews are built around criteria announced in a writing task, but this review had very few criteria, so this one is built around options. The first set of options connects peer review to larger course goals, to the instructor's personal pedagogy, and to students as learners or future professionals. The second set covers the pedagogical principles in the readings. Because we're interested in peer learning pedagogy, we wanted to see which of these ideas bubbled up in the ways you're describing peer learning to your students. The third set acknowledges that students bring to peer learning quite a bit of emotional baggage. Getting them to a more positive place with higher expectations of peer learning takes intentional conversation. This checklist is just a way of marking that need as part of the work of building a culture of feedback in your classroom. The rating scale is designed to get groups to nominate a peer exemplar for discussion, and I'll do that in a minute. The comment prompt reinforced Describe, Evaluate, Suggest and provided a model, which was designed to nudge reviewers in giving great feedback aligned to the criteria above. In short, the review task is a map for revision. It describes a landscape of possibilities for writers to revise. It is not prescribing that writers do X, Y, or Z to achieve a specific goal, which is often a good strategy for a review. But this one is really more informative and generative. It's laying out the options. The second strategy of inspiring revision relies on the zone of proximal development. Before we work through the data together, remember this image from the videos you watched on Monday? This is a little dancer who looks to the side and sees another little dancer doing the right move, so she makes adjustments. In Eli, looking to your right and looking to your left and then making a slight adjustment happens when you see your own feedback. I'm showing the teacher view of an individual student's feedback report, but each of you have a report on the feedback you received and the feedback you gave. The feedback you received report itemizes what reviewers said about your draft. In these trait ID checklists, reviewers are saying, yes, I see a feature, or no, I don't see that feature, and the percentages indicate the rate of agreement among readers. The numbers are not an assessment of effectiveness, not a grade. It's an assessment of reviewers' agreement about whether they noticed the feature. Where you see 100%, both reviewers agree that that feature was present in the draft. Where you see 50% or less, that means one or more reviewers did not notice that feature. As you look at these numbers, the question to ask is, did the reader who missed that element just read too quickly, or is that element too subtle? Similarly, the class average tells you of all the drafts read by all the reviewers, how many reviewers noticed that feature. The class average tells you what's popular or dominant in the whole set of drafts, so you can decide how much you want to be like everyone else. In the scaled response items, you'll get both a rating and a comment if the reviewer included it. Use this feedback as food for thought. Food for thought about revision is important, but it's actions that matter most. Eli invites students to take 2 quick actions as they consider the feedback they've received. First, rate the helpfulness of each comment. Give 1 star for each yes answer. Does the comment describe your writing so that you understand what readers are getting from your paper? Does the comment help you evaluate your progress toward the assignment goals? And does the comment offer a specific suggestion that you can follow when you revise? If it has all 3 required moves for a helpful comment, then that comment should get 3 stars. The next 2 stars you can use at your discretion. A 4th star might be awarded for particular respect shown to your work or to you. I call that the kindness star. And the 5th star is reserved only for those comments that meet all of the previous criteria and help you transform your writing. So use the helpfulness scale to evaluate your comments and work through them carefully. As you rate the helpfulness, consider whether I've given the comment a blue thumbs up or not. I endorse comments that follow, describe, evaluate, suggest, and push the draft in a really good direction. This one decision about how helpful you find a particular comment flows back to the reviewer and to the instructor. In a low-stakes way, without affecting anyone's grade, writers can use the helpfulness rating to say, I'm getting what I need to revise from you, or not. Instructors can use that information to coach particular reviewers who are struggling to give helpful feedback. After you rate the helpfulness of a comment, your second decision is to decide whether to add it to your revision plan. On the student side, you have a button for a comment over the right side that says Add to Plan. When you click it, you'll choose which writing task this comment applies to, and then a copy of this comment is moved to the plan associated with this writing task. This decision initiates the revision plan. Later, I'll show you how to finish the plan. Eli's features are helping writers work through a decision-making process around each comment. How helpful was this comment to me in guiding my revision, and do I want this comment on my plan? These easy choices help writers spend more time thinking through revision. The third strategy for inspiring revision is to give students a perspective of what happened across the whole class. When you're working in a review group, you can only see the drafts that have been shared with you. From the instructor's vantage point, I can see what's happening across groups, and I want writers to have a full sense of what other people have been doing. I can do that by talking through the class data on the Writing Feedback tab. This first checklist asks reviewers to identify how the writer explained the value of peer learning. If you did not get full reader agreement about the third checklist item, why peer learning has value for students as a learner or as a future professional, that is your top revision priority. These other two are just things for you to think about. The second checklist reveals that most readers of the articles picked up on the idea that helpful feedback is formative, timely, descriptive, goal-referenced, and goal-directed. And that makes a lot of sense given the purpose of the syllabus. I do want to encourage you to think more about the importance of designing reviews around small bits of writing with targeted feedback due to the cognitive load burden. When we ask novice reviewers to respond to messy drafts using criteria they barely understand, and to write to a writer whose relationship they care about, we're asking them to do a heavy lift. So we can lighten their load and increase their chances of learning in that environment by making our writing tasks small and making the review task very, very targeted. The third checklist acknowledges that students really have low expectations for peer learning, and to change it, you've got to be intentional about the experience and proving that it can be better than they expect. What did bubble up in your syllabus blurbs already, though, is our students' resistance and their disengagement. You might not want to address these in your blurb or on the first day of peer learning, but these are things you're going to have to address at some point during the semester if peer learning becomes a regular part of your class. The most important thing I can do as an instructor when debriefing is to model, and so I used a star rating question to get reviewers to tell me which drafts they thought were most effective. This is a great time to stop the video and read the draft. This draft has a lot of substance. It begins by asking students to think about feedback as a motivator for revision and to think about revision as it is connected to growth as a writer. Both of those arguments are really important for creating a culture of feedback. The second thing that I think this draft does really well is to help students understand in this like middle section. Reviewers begin to think that each comment they offer is an argument for revision, they will be more specific and be able to do all of these things rather than offering the I like, I don't like, this kind of feedback. The next part of this draft encourages students to think about the revision plan, or it anticipates that when reviewers argue for a revision, writers can resist that argument. They can not follow some feedback or they can accept some feedback. And so this makes that switch more clear. The last part of the paragraph mentions the scaffold, and it ends with what I call the hat trick of peer learning, that students are learning from the reviewer's seat, and they are also learning from their seat as a writer. So this model offers a lot of richness for how you can connect different pieces of peer learning with the goals of peer learning. Here's a second model. Again, you might want to pause the video to read it. The second draft focuses on a couple of ideas. The first is that peer review acts like a mirror to show writers what they've accomplished. That idea is really developed in the second paragraph here. And I think that's an important thing to think about. Often we design peer review as an error hunt, and we try to get reviewers to point out all the flaws. Instead, when you think about getting reviewers to just say back to writers what they are understanding, what they see working, what they see not working, we can really shift everybody's experience of what peer review can be when we aim for mirror rather than error hunt. The second piece, though, in this early part of this paragraph encourages students to understand that a lot of their learning in peer review comes from imitation or from seeing a peer do something that they also can do. And I think that's an important piece to say to students because often we've framed imitation as cheating. The last piece here that I want to kind of call attention to is the reference to the golden rule. And we make a similar reference in the student module that we use to start ELI. So we encourage all instructors to assign feedback and improvement and then ask students to write a response paper to it as their first activity in the app. And I'll send you the details about that later. But we cover the golden rule in this section on the qualities of helpful feedback. And so that can be a nice juncture point between your blurb and the reading here. Let's move on to Model 3. This model takes a very different approach, and I'm showing it to call out a couple of things that you might do as teachers to elicit this kind of draft. So this writer chose to include a head note to say to reviewers, this is what I'm trying to do. Use my goals, not what the instructor said. And that is so important in giving writers agency to direct reviewers' attention in particular ways. The second thing that I think works really well in this draft is that the points are quite clear. So the first point covers what we call giver's gain, and we have a set of readings about giver's gain that you can use, but we think that the empirical research on giver's gain is quite strong. It says that the best reviewers do the best revisions and therefore benefit the most from the writing process. And so encouraging every student to become a good reviewer is your best bet that that student will also become a better writer. So you might want to include the concept of giver's gain like this writer has. The second part here talks about how participating in peer review connects to professional skills, both in terms of writing and in peer feedback. So Bill Hart Davidson, one of Eli's co-inventors, has this line. He says that your own writing gets you hired, but the feedback you give other people gets you promoted, because managers spend their entire day giving feedback. So this can be another way to help students understand why the work of peer learning relates to their future careers. The third point here uses a word that is a trigger word for this group. And I say that because in the contextual comments, a lot of you pointed out that editing was not the thing we wanted students to do in peer feedback. And that's based on the reading and on something we cover in our own student module, where we don't want students to really be focused on correcting commas, on the sentence level mechanics. We want them to be able to do revision. So I offer this model, this editing word here, as just a moment to acknowledge that this group has particular ideas of what editing is inside the revision process. The fourth model I want to talk about has a couple of moves that are different from what we've read before. This model opens with what I think is one of the most important points for instructional design, and that is, if a student has a draft that looks done, they are done. And so to get them to revise, you have to have them share things that are not quite finished, and small bits are a way to do that. The second paragraph here revisits this notion of peer feedback as reader response or as mirror. And so it encourages reviewers to really trust what readers are telling them in peer feedback. The third move in this paragraph is to acknowledge that what we're interested in a writing class are the patterns, right? Like the drafts are just helping students build muscles so that they have patterns in their head when they read other tasks. That's the transferability. And so being cognizant that we have to help students notice those patterns and be able to connect not just what they're doing in this draft, but how this draft connects to another draft, I think is an important reminder. I want to finish the modeling by showing two praise comments. Praise is often the thing students do in peer learning, and it's so important to help them offer effective praise. So I'm choosing these two examples so that you have some strategies for helping students write better praise comments. In my classes, I distinguish between naked praise, things like good job, and clothed praise, praise that explains why it is good and then offers a suggestion. Neither of these comments are naked. They both include an explanation of what is good and why it is good. But the first comment includes some self-deprecating language that makes it uncomfortable for the writer who receives it. I often talk to reviewers who include these kinds of comments to say, let's think about how you can make this about the writer rather than about yourself. The second comment here offers a really nice explanation of why something is so powerful, and the way to make it better is to add a suggestion or a way for the writer to extend this strength to another part of the draft. So praise is going to happen in peer review. Students are going to praise more than you think needs to be praised, but the research shows that students really rely on the praise to help them feel motivated to keep going. So really think about ways to make praise an effective part of what students are doing in peer learning. Let me pull together all the different ways you can be inspired to revise your draft. In the checklists, consider what was popular and what you were missing. In the ratings, consider how evaluation helps you set goals. In the comments, rate the helpfulness of the comments you've received and add the best ones to your revision plan. Let me show you how to do the revision plan once you've added all the feedback from a review task. Use Home to navigate to your dashboard, and then click into the revision report. Your revision plan will have a set of instructions above, and it will also give you a link to a video that explains the technical steps for how to build a revision plan. Any comments that you've added from peers will appear in a list that you can drag and drop. So once you've got the comments on your plan from the review task, then you can drag and drop them in priority order. You can also add a note to explain how you are going to use that feedback. The note is addressed to you and to me as the instructor. In the additional notes section, this is a great place to add any other revision goals you have based on your work as a reviewer, based on this debriefing video, and based on any of the peer feedback that you didn't actually add to your plan but you still want to be influenced by. So once you've saved your note, submit it and then I'll see it and give you feedback by the end of day Friday. So let me go back to home. In your dashboard, you're going to see a resubmit task as well. This is the last task of the week. I don't actually expect you to revise this blurb this week, but I wanted you to see how Eli takes your original writing and makes it available to you in the resubmit task. This feature makes it quick and easy to ask students to revise. This concludes the video on debriefing writing from the peer learning activity. I hope it was helpful for giving you a sense of how you can use Eli's features to make sure writers have the information they need to make good decisions about revising.